Today from the global lane, Trump's hefty tariffs usher in a trade war with China. A hotter war could be coming.
The boom is over. China's leaders don't know how to deal with it. Now, I don't think that Xi Jinping is in any mood to make a deal. Xi Jinping is lashing out. And he could very well decide that a war is his only option.
Smart cars, modern-day technological marvels spying on you.
Your car's #1 job is to get you places safely. But its #2 job is data collection. Your data. It's collecting it and sharing it.
Miraculous healings in Israel at the Garden Tomb. A Romanian regains his eyesight.
He removed his glasses and then all of a sudden he was able to see perfectly. I hear the men screaming inside the tomb saying, "I can see."
And my conversation with a Muslim man about good works and earning his way into heaven. And it's all right here on the Global Lane. Responding to President Trump's 145% tariffs on Chinese goods entering the United States, a China customs official insisted the sky won't fall. Joining us to share his thoughts on Trump's tariffs on China is China analyst Gordon Chang, author of the book Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, and also the book The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, the CCP complains about the tariffs, but now they're downplaying them, almost like Alfred E. Newman. What, me? Worry? So what's the truth here? I'm sure they're publicly putting on a good face, but they're deeply concerned about this. Why?
They're got to be deeply concerned because their economy already is probably contracting. And if it isn't now, it will be in a month or two. We see the price signals from March, which showed deflation in both the consumer segment and also in the factory sector. But also they're having their 2008 downturn now. In 2008, they didn't want to have a recession, so they overstimulated their economy. They took on an enormous amount of debt. They now got to resolve it. And all of a sudden, you have President Trump imposing tariffs for China's predatory and criminal trade practices. So all of these are hitting at the same time.
4 years ago, you wrote the book, The Coming Collapse of China. Could this be the moment? Is China about to collapse economically?
Yes, I think it actually could. Now, I was a little bit early in my prediction, but what we are seeing right now is basically the end of the economic model. The boom is over. China's leaders don't know how to deal with it. Xi Jinping reveres Mao Zedong. He's taking the country in the wrong direction, just as all of these crises are hitting. And also, China is looking at the world in very different ways than it did in, for instance, the beginning of the reform era at the end of the 1970s. Then China was reforming and opening up. Now it is doing the opposite of reform and closing down. And people are noticing. And so that's why you have the great pessimism in Chinese society. That's why we have more social controls. That's why we have a much more aggressive Chinese regime.
Investor entrepreneur Kevin O'Leary says Trump should continue to squeeze China, maybe even raise tariffs as high as 400%. Your thoughts on that?
Well, tariffs are now at 145%, except for electronics. At 145%, that's shutting out most Chinese products into the U.S. market. So whether we raise it to 400 or 4,000%, it probably doesn't have much of a practical effect. But what Kevin O'Leary is saying is that we should keep the pressure on until China makes a deal. Now, I don't think that Xi Jinping is in any mood to make a deal. I think he's more prepared to take his country off the cliff than actually do something which is economically rational, which is to come to terms with the U.S. But that's nothing that we can deal with. These are the problems in the Chinese regime itself. And the United States is just going to have to do what is best for Americans, protect our people, protect our manufacturers. And we just have to watch what the Chinese do for themselves, to themselves.
What are the consequences for the U.S.? Many Americans are worried about higher prices because we're used to cheaper Chinese goods.
Well, two things. First of all, in the first round of Trump's tariffs in 2018, China absorbed somewhere between 75 to 81% of the cost of that. Americans didn't feel those tariffs. This time, China has even more incentive to absorb costs, and we're seeing some evidence that it's already doing that. But also, we Americans have got to remember something. For decades, our presidents have pursued deeply misguided and injurious trade policies. And we're going to have to bear pain to get out of this. If we don't bear this pain, China is going to take over all of our manufacturers and it's going to rule us. So the question is, do we Americans want to remain free and sovereign, or do we not? And so President Trump, whether people like him or hate him, he is the person who is going to save our economy and our society, and we need to support him at this critical moment.
The EU worries it will be flooded with Chinese products. So how concerned should our European friends be?
Very concerned, as well as our friends all around the world, because the products that China is not going to be sending to the U.S., they're going to send them somewhere. They're going to try and flood markets in Europe, Japan, in what they call the global South. These countries are going to erect tariff barriers of their own because they cannot afford to have China decimating their local industries. So China is in a very difficult position right now. We're seeing the export-oriented factories in the Pearl River Delta in the southern portion of the country. They don't have any orders. They're going out of business. They can't sustain themselves. But right now it's a very difficult situation, not just for China, but for the rest of the world, because China has put itself into a position where there are no good outcomes for anybody.
Okay, so President Xi is likely to double down. So do you see this trade war evolving into a hot war, maybe over Taiwan, as China begins to collapse economically?
Well, it could be Taiwan, could be elsewhere. In the last couple of weeks, we have seen very provocative Chinese military activity directed against South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and Australia. And that shows that Xi Jinping is lashing out. And he could very well decide that a war is his only option. And it wouldn't be to rally the Chinese people, Gary, because the Chinese people right now do not want war. But I think Xi Jinping might see war is in his personal interest, because it would prevent other Communist Party figures from challenging and maybe even deposing him. So yes, the Chinese regime can lash out, and we need to be especially concerned, and we have to be prepared for anything.
Okay, Gordon Chang, China expert, always a pleasure talking with you. We've been doing it for many years. We appreciate you. God bless.
Well, I appreciate the ability to talk to you, Gary, so thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Modern automobiles are technological marvels. Some can even self-drive and park. However, these new cars also act as spies on wheels. Dale Hurd reports even if you're just near one of these vehicles, it could be gathering information about you.
This may look like a car, however, it's more like a giant rolling sensor. From the tires to the entertainment system, tracking not only your driving habits, but recording personal information about you completely unrelated to driving. Modern cars have been called a privacy nightmare. Your car's #1 job is to get you places safely. But its #2 job is data collection. Your data. It's collecting it and sharing it. New cars can collect more data about you than anything else you own, including your cell phone, and for good reason. Driver data has been valued at $400 billion per year.
The saying in Silicon Valley is, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product. But what's strange with cars is that the average new car costs almost $50,000. You're still the product.
Andrea Amico is the founder and CEO of Privacy for Cars, which offers privacy solutions to the auto industry.
If you ask Americans how they feel about their car, they'll tell you it's an extension of their home. They feel it's a very private place.
It's far from private. A study by Mozilla's Privacy Not Included project found cars to be the worst product for privacy they've ever tested. The fine print on Nissan's privacy statement from 2023 says it may collect sensitive personal information including citizenship status, immigration status, race, national origin, religious or philosophical beliefs, sexual orientation, sexual activity, health diagnosis data, and genetic information. After an uproar, the company's most recent privacy statement omits the collection of sexual and genetic information. Security and privacy expert Thorne Klosowski.
I think that a lot of these privacy policies are written in a way that it just encompasses everything. So it's kind of hard to say on if they're actually collecting anything or if they're just written so that they could theoretically collect something.
Some new car owners have seen their premiums go up after their insurance company received their driving data.
Some stuff is more obvious. Am I slamming on the brakes really hard, or am I going through red lights when I shouldn't be? Some of them are a little bit less obvious. Which areas are you driving and what time are you driving?
Used cars have another privacy problem. This YouTuber said after selling his Volvo, the next owner never reset the car's security profile.
I can log in to my app and I can see every single place that new owner has gone. From the school their kids go to the church, to where they work, to where their house is, physical address right in the driveway. I know everything about them. All I have to do is an address search, and I know exactly who lives there.
Then there are kill switches that allow dealers or the government to shut off your car. Some car dealers already use them when a buyer falls behind in their payments. A federal mandate for a kill switch in all vehicles sold after 2026 was embedded into the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Some in Congress want it removed from the law.
A kill switch in an automobile that would monitor the driving of a vehicle and then stop the vehicle from operating if the car itself decides that the operator is not driving safely.
I do understand that the technology is very near to being developed that would allow for a passive type of system that would detect when a driver has an alcohol concentration above a predetermined level, and that would not allow the vehicle to be operated.
Polls show an overwhelming majority of car buyers want to control their own data. Klazowski says the first thing car buyers should do is shut off as much of the data collection as possible.
I would open up the settings of the infotainment system. I would start there, see if there's any privacy settings that you can change. Maybe look for any sort of indication that it might be sharing information with an insurance company or with a third party.
The old saying, buyer beware, has never been more true than when buying a new car.
Dale Hurd joins us with more. Dale, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation says new cars are not spying on people. Instead, they say they're keeping people safe. So tell us more, and just how much information do they need to do that?
Yeah, that's baloney. I drive a 10-year-old car without all of this spying, and cars do just fine on their own, sensing themselves. The car sensing the movement of the car, the way you drive it. It doesn't need your address book or your emails or your heart rate to keep you safe.
And insurance companies can monitor our driving habits, our speed, braking, etc. So are these examples of them raising people's rates as a result of monitoring? And I always thought insurance company monitoring was voluntary to get lower rates.
Well, GM got busted giving data to Allstate, and the Federal Trade Commission has penalized GM and OnStar, and so I think this has stopped for now. But people need to check their own car. They need to do research on the car company they bought their vehicle from and find out if this indeed might be happening. It shouldn't be happening because if it is, another car company is going to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's just a matter of security settings, I understand. So what worries a lot of conservatives and libertarians is the idea of the government tracking your movements, also being able to flip a kill switch on your car. That may be a good thing, I guess, if police are trying to stop a criminal from getting away. But what about that innocent person simply attending a Trump rally at the Capitol, for example? How likely is that to happen in the future?
It's still in the law. It's supposed to take effect in 2026. It's in Joe Biden's misnamed, Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act. They should have just called it the Pork Act. But it's still in the law. Republicans are trying to get it yanked out because it's very vague. And it doesn't use the word kill switch. It says stopping the vehicle if the driver is impaired. Well, what's impaired? They mean alcohol consumption or drug use, but it could be stopped for any number of reasons. And so that's why Republicans are trying to get it taken out of the law.
And quickly, Dale, what can people do then to manage their privacy settings on their vehicles other than that?
Yeah, well, if you have a new car, you were given a packet from the dealer and the things you signed, I would go back and look and see exactly what you signed, because everyone at the dealer showroom at the time of purchase has stars in their eyes and they're not thinking about privacy. So do your own research and find out if they're spying on you.
Okay, Dale Hurd, a story we have not seen anywhere else. We appreciate you. Thank you, Dale.
Sure.
We had to share this story for Easter week. Miraculous healings are occurring in Israel at the Garden Tomb, the location that many believe to be the site of Jesus' resurrection. Paul Strand brings us the story.
The great miracle of Jesus Christ's resurrection took place right here in the Garden Tomb, or one much like it. But the miracles didn't stop then. They still go on today, and even right here. Cesar Fleitas works here and recalls a time when a man from Romania came here who had incredibly poor eyesight. Then this man walked into the tomb.
He wanted to look at the symbol that is inside the tomb, the symbol of a cross that has the Greek letters, and he wasn't able to make out the symbol very well, so he removed his glasses, and then all of a sudden he was able to see perfectly. I hear the men screaming inside the tomb saying, I can see, I can see. Of course, he was speaking in Romanian. His pastor, who was standing nearby, he translated for me. He said, he can see.
Another miracle that took place involved a boy who suffered from hydrocephalus, an abnormal and dangerous buildup of fluid deep in the brain. Now, every year his family came from Ecuador to the Garden Tomb. This young man, Giancarlo Rodriguez, was that little boy, and back then he was paralyzed from the waist down due to the hydrocephalus.
20 plus years ago, they came as a family. They brought the son inside the tomb, and as they were praying, all of a sudden they hear their son crying. The husband turned around to look back to see what was going on, and then all of a sudden they see their son standing there. And that was the miracle. The healing took place at that moment.
Before that healing, Giancarlo's sister had lost her faith.
She couldn't understand why God would allow such a thing to happen to her brother. But then after she saw the healing that God performed in her brother's body, that became the turning point in her life.
I simply want to say that Giancarlo is proof that God is real.
As for Giancarlo's whole family now,
they're all involved in ministry, serving the Lord.
Liz Tingman chronicles signs and wonders that happen at the Garden Tomb. She told CBN News about Pastor Hobson Laura. He'd suffered an extremely painful, unending headache since he was 13. Then in 2010, this 48-year-old visited the tomb.
He suddenly was overwhelmed with this uncontrollable urge to weep as he went into the tomb. And then he came out and he went on to the area over here near the olive trees, and he said he just held on to an olive tree because he was weeping uncontrollably. And he said he was praying for 40 minutes. And when the weeping stopped, he realized that he was healed. He had no headache. And he'd had this headache since the age of 13.
Fleitas experienced his own miracle when a visiting Brazilian pastor came out of the tomb, insisting God just told him to pray for Fleitas' healing. Little did he know, Fleitas had been suffering from sharp liver pains for years.
And he looked at me and he said to me, I want you to understand that the power comes from the Lord. It is the Lord God Almighty that heals you. And then he anointed me with oil and he prayed over me. And that sharp pain that I was experiencing was gone, completely gone.
And forever?
Yes, it's gone.
Tingman also recalled a Japanese non-believer who a guide took around, starting at the overlook of Skull Hill, where many believe Christ was crucified.
And she took her to Skull Hill and explained about Calvary and so on. And this woman said, she spoke English, she said, I know nothing about Jesus Christ. Tell me more. She went into the tomb, and my colleague said when she was in the tomb, she was visibly moved. Something was moving her, and she was weeping, actually. And she said, I can see him. And my friend said, what can you see? She said, I see a man with a crown on his head. Now, this is a woman who didn't know anything about the gospel stories. And she said, it's not a gold crown. And she began to describe a crown of thorns on this man's head that she was seeing.
If you don't know this Jesus Christ, well, we Christians believe that he can save you, heal you, perform a miracle for you right now on the spot. All you have to do is pray and ask him. That's the good news of Easter. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Garden Tomb, Jerusalem.
Easter week is the perfect time to reflect on where we stand in our faith. I recall a conversation I had a few years ago with a Muslim man in the Middle East. I told him I was a Christian, and he respectfully asked me why I believed Jesus was God when he was only a prophet. I explained that a prophet wouldn't have performed all the miracles that Jesus did, healing the lame and the blind, even raising people from the dead. I told him about the prophet Isaiah, who in chapter 53 of his book spoke of a coming suffering Messiah. I then asked him to explain to me about Islam and how a person can attain paradise with Allah. The Muslim man explained that he had to recite the Shahada. That's the Islamic profession of faith. Go to the mosque and pray, fast during Ramadan, go on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and do good works. I asked, so good works will get you to heaven? He replied, yes, of course. I followed up with, how many good works do you have to do to get into heaven? He answered, I don't know. I pressed, if you don't know now, will you ever know? He replied, only after I die and appear before Allah. I continued, well, let's say it's 1,000 good works in your lifetime, but you only did 999. You find out you fell short by one. So you're not forgiven. You don't get into heaven. A noticeable look of deep regret fell on his face, and he sighed. Then I explained that only Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I told him that you can accept him just as you are. You don't have to perform a certain number of good works to be forgiven for your sins to get into heaven. It's a free gift. The Muslim man did not accept the free gift that day, but he left thinking about what I had said. So this Easter, examine your faith. Let your heart and mind reflect on the stone that was rolled away 2,000 years ago. Just as Jesus stepped out of the tomb, he wants you to overcome death and be resurrected into a new and abundant life. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Happy Resurrection Day. And until next time, be blessed.